Where's the where's our PowerPoint? Is that it right there? Right there, yeah. Okay, good. I got it. Welcome, everyone. I'm John Durley, and I'm filling in for Vic Vaccaro, who's our normal seminar host. And we're happy to see so many of you here in person. It's been a long time when we haven't been gathering much in person, so it's great to see people's faces again. And also, we have a number of people participating by video conference. And so those of you who are on video, we're glad to have you and welcome as well. We have a really good program for you tonight. I'll just move right into some of the things that are going to happen. Let's see, can we move that over? Okay, that's better. Our speaker is Captain Garrett Ross. He's a well-known charter captain here, Inshore charter captain in the area. He's on his way here. He's not here right now, but he promises to be here when it's his time to come on the program. But anyway, we have a raffle for a half-day fishing trip with Captain Ross, and it's actually a trip for 2 people. And we're going to award 2 people who you may not know each other. You're going to have to share a trip with somebody if you win the raffle. But anyway, it's a raffle for a half-day fishing with Captain Ross. We've already sold quite a few tickets. You may have purchased them online when you reserved your seat for tonight, but we can sell more now. So if you'd like to buy a ticket, Jeff is coming around, and they're $5 a piece. Well, you can see the price. Discount for multiple tickets. And so just raise your hand when Jeff comes by, and he'll sell you a ticket if you want to get another one or get more. Okay, here's our agenda tonight. We're soon going to tell some fishing stories. And then we're going to do a little commercial, and then we're going to have a saw in our little video about the offshore reefs and our talking puffer fish. A little commercial about the $300,000 has been raised because of the marine license plate that CCA Georgia got the legislature approval. We're going to give you an update on that tonight. And then we'll talk a little bit about volunteer opportunities, and then we'll have our speaker, and then our president will do a meeting wrap up. Okay, it's time for fishing stories, and this is where we invite the audience to participate. You got one, Jeff?
No, I don't have one. I'm just going to say I'm asked the people online.
Oh, okay. Yeah, if you're online, would you mute yourself so we don't get the feedback here in the room? Thanks very much, folks. Okay, now time for fishing stories. Anybody? Well, I know we got some folks here who've been fishing today. You guys want to tell your story? Your name? Scott Owenby and John Durant, they went fishing in the Wausau Sound today, and they showed me the pictures of some really big bull redfish they caught today. Yeah. So anyone else? They were really big.
Many times as we fished for years, he's never caught a bull red. I've caught a lot of bull reds. Yeah. So anyway, I guess we heard Captain Fuzzy on Monty Jet. I heard him last week. So Scott, let's go out today. We went out and caught some stingrays and stuff that he caught a nice bull red, and then he caught, as he told you, his sucker. So he was happy. We had a great time. We got pictures. So I know fishing stories sometimes my wife calls them lies. Yeah. But that's pretty much it. I guess you can hear me. What were you? We went to the little, what our boat, Scotland's a coffee bluff. I'm out here at the landings, been out here 30 years or so, but we went out of the Landings Harbor Marina. We went to the little whiting pole, marker 22, caught a bunch of whiting, then went to another pole we like, pretty close to there. And we just cut up whiting and used the cut up bait that we normally do. He had some pogies and stuff, but that's what we use. Yeah, and they're out there. I mean, you have to be patient. We got out there at 11:30 fishing for bull reds, left at 4:30. This first one we might have caught an hour later after catch big rain, sharks. You kind of frustrated when you look into that, those type of stuff. But anyway, that's what he caught it off of.
Yeah, cotton mullet,
Yeah.
also real popular. Any other stories? Any other fish stories?
I have a question.
Yeah, Marv.
What's the story with the boat that's the boat that is out south of the island that looks like it ran aground and it's been there for 6 months?
Yes, that's been.
Does anyone, Paulette, you boat down there, you know the story about that?
Yes.
Yeah. Well, we will find out about that. And we'll put it on our website.
Okay.
Well, I don't need this. I have my own light here. Yeah, I have a fish story. I caught a redfish today too, but mine was only 15 inches long. Nothing like the one that these guys caught. But anyway, the Landings Club has started to allow fishing on Mondays on a closed golf course each week. And so I went out and fished on some of the club lagoons today. Fished about 2 hours at high tide. I caught one red drum, one ladyfish, and 3 spots. But it wasn't a great day of fishing, but at least I had some action for a couple hours. So it's kind of fun doing that. Okay, any other fish stories? We have some photos here. I don't know if any of these guys are, let's see. Here we go.
Have any of you guys ever caught finfish? You have?
They're popular around here, Norm.
Are they?
Yeah. See, Frank, is that black drum, was that caught by your neighbor? Ed, you want to tell about that fish? Yeah.
Yeah, I don't mind sharing with you. That's about a 28 or 29 black drum. I caught about 4 feet of water. I was living off of Oak Ridge. And shortly after that one, I caught another one about 2 inches shorter. I went to bring him in and I thought, oh, well, I'll just step off this little edge here because I'm having trouble pulling him in. And I wound up about 4 feet of water myself. And I went on to the fish. And so I had the 2 black drums that were right in succession within 5 minutes of each other. And it's in the Oak Ridge area. Very simple fishing, just off the road. Bait. Oh, bait. Oh, I was looking to do some live bait, live shrimp. But honestly, you know, now that you got me on this thing, a redfish will hit any dead bait, live bait, you name it, mullet, cut mullet, all stuff in all hundred circumstances. You know, $5 will get you, you know, some dead shrimp over at Danny's. Since we're $1 $1 is, which we give you
Hey, dude. Okay, let's see, who else we got on this picture? Let's see. John Dahl, is he here tonight? John Dahl? John's one of our CCA regulars, and I'm glad to see his picture up there a couple of times with those. And so are Riley and Robert Hale, CCA regulars. And but they're not, yeah, Jeff? Yeah, I will. And Jack Welch is here who heads the thing up. But if I get it wrong, Jack, you can come up here and straighten it out. But the Landings Club, within the golf course boundaries, there are a lot of really nice lagoons and they got lots of fish in them, but you haven't been able to fish them before now from the club property. So the Landings Club decided we'd try a program to let club members fish the lagoons on the club property on the days that the golf courses are closed. And the program right now is for golf members. It's for every Monday, one course is open for fishing and certain lagoons are identified that you can fish in. So that's our program, and we've been going for 3 weeks, and we've got about 50, we have to register to fish, and we've got what, 50 people registered now, Jack?
We have about 50 slots. It's $30 to register, and you can full golf member. The reason we want to make sure we've got people out there that expect the golf properly, make sure it's in there. Fishing is good. If you want to register and get on a waiting list, we have another set of hats. The registration. Probably up to 100 people in the next couple of days. Lifestyle, we have exhibitors that go around 3 times a day during the Monday and introduce themselves and find out what's working, what's not working, and giving a list of what's interactive.
Yeah, how would we have that? How do we get all that?
The club website. In fact, if you can't do it that way, then get a hold of who's the director of marketing, and Gary will send you the link for the form to fill out. Register you, your charge card gets filled, and you go on. You will get every Friday email of which courses are open on Monday and what lagoons are available. Right. Yeah, thanks for that question, Jim.
Well, I guess that's the fishing stories. Now we'll move to, okay, Landings Lagoon Guides. Hal Evans is back in the back. He's our Lagoon Guide chairperson. And the Landings Lagoon Guide, he's holding one up. It's a really nice guidebook that tells you about the lagoons here at the Landings, what fish are in each one, how to catch them, which are salt, which are freshwater. It's really what bait, what tackle to use. It's really a very handy guide if you want to start fishing here and you haven't done much and want to get some good information in a hurry. So Al's back there and you can get a lagoon guide from him if you'd like to have one. Now, Chuck, you're going to talk about this, right? I'm going to let you have this one because it works better. We'll use this. Right. I'm going to stand next to you. We're brothers.
I can't think of a better guy to have as my younger brother. If I had his brains, I'd really be someplace. Anyway, I've been here 25 years, and I don't think we're doing a good enough job of telling the audience on the importance of CCA. So I ask for this opportunity. Before I do, though, I want Tillman Clark to stand up. Tillman Clark is a 15-year-old sophomore at Jenkins High School, and he is in a engineering program, and he is quite a guy. He is the fellow who talked last month about the tarpon that he caught, and one was a 20-pounder, and he cast netted his own mullet, kept them live, fished with live mullet, and caught 2 tarpon. And where'd you get the membership application? Margaret, where'd you get that? Because you turned it in afterwards. At the back of the, you just picked it up there. And Margaret Clark. She's a lawyer in town, and during the last couple of weeks, as we've been advertising our kids fishing program, Margaret called me up and said, "Hey, I got access to a couple of Facebook groups that you're not advertising the kids fishing derby on, because none of the people that I know of, the young kids, know about it." So I hooked her up with Pat Brooks. She ran those Facebook ads. So this duo is really quite an addition. And up until, last month, we didn't know him. And now Stillman is a full member. And he's also volunteered to help build Darcy Hill. There is Tillman Clark. Tillman is an expert on technology, and he has offered to help build with technologies. And Margaret Clark has offered to work with Susie Fusco and advertise her next Castaway Club group meeting at the end of, I want to finish this. I've got 25 years, guys. But we don't get many people like this. So these people, if they don't know what we're doing, we're not going to get. This is important. John Duran mentioned earlier, and it was a slide we had, that the license plate program had raised $300,000. Okay, I called the director of CNR, and that's the Georgia Department of Natural Resources Coastal Director, Doug Heyman, said that the license plate would not have happened without CCA support. How many people in the room here knew that that was true? That the license plate initiative only happened because of CCA? Show of hands. My guess is there are too many hands. Not a lot of hands. Okay. So I then spoke to Doug Heyman, and he is one of our biggest cheerleaders because of this. $600,000 has been raised. And last month, we talked about a 1 minute and 30-second news broadcast that had been shown of the DNR going out and after cleaning up the sailboat, thinking it is the first inshore sort of habitat. But there was no mention about CCA's involvement. So I spoke to Doug Heyman. I said, Doug, didn't some of that $600,000 that was raised because of CCA's effort help pay for that? Absolutely. Now, guys, I mean, you got to say that that's got to be worth something in terms of whether you go to work for or go volunteer for another group or think about us, or go in the back of the room and get a $35 membership. Because if we can increase our membership, the politicians know that every membership is a vote. So, help us out. And at the end of last month's meeting, nobody came back. So that's why I asked for this time, because I don't think we're selling the importance that CCA brings to this area. And that's why I asked for the time. Thank you.
Thanks, Chuck. Chuck's the only one in here who's been in CCA Georgia longer than I have. And he's, as you can tell, he's got CCA on his heartstrings. Yeah. Thank you. Yes, thank you. Yes, you can join, and Dave's going to talk about that again later too, but you can join on our website, ccaskidaway.org, and there's paper forms back there that you can use to join. I thought I was going, okay, all right. Yeah, our Kids Fishing Derby is this coming Saturday. It's one of our signature events for CCA. We've been putting it on for over 20 years, and it's held at the Kids Fishing Lagoon, which is behind the fire station in Oak Ridge, right near the intersection of West Cross Road and Logs Landing Road. It starts at 9 o'clock in the morning. If you've got a grandchild or neighbor child or child that wants to fish, get them there by 8:30 to get them registered to fish. They need an adult with them, but that's all they need, because CCA's got tackle and bait and people there to help them with the fishing and everything. Lots of prizes. And almost every year we have every kid catch a fish, and most kids catch lots of fish. I'm going to talk about volunteers now, but Chuck, is there anything more that you wanted to say about it? Okay. Oh yeah, you can register right now tonight if you want to. Yes, we have online registration as well. That's coming next. Here's the volunteers. We have a lot of volunteers in CCA, and in fact, one of the things that distinguishes CCA from most other MGAs I know about is that we are very much a hands-on organization. We do raise a lot of money. We give a lot of money to support conservation and marine science outreach and education. But we also do a lot of work with our own hands. And then these are two programs we're talking about right here on this chart. The Castaway, which was a summer education program for children, and the Kids Fishing Derby. And you can see the people that have volunteered for those things just in recent months and coming up Saturday. So we're not armchair environmentalists. We are hands-on, get the job done kind of guys and women. Okay, someone asked me tonight if we're going to have handouts, and we don't. But if you miss a meeting, we record all these meetings and post them on YouTube. So if there's something you hear and want to learn more about, you can look us up on the CCA Skidaway YouTube channel and see any of our past meetings, and you'll be able to see this one soon. Okay, now we're getting to the meat of the program. Our speaker tonight is Captain Garrett Ross. He's over here, and we're glad to have you here, Captain Ross. Garrett has been a real supporter of CCA, and some of you have fished with him before, I know, and we're delighted to have you, and I'm going to turn the program over to you now,
Does that work? Hey guys, I'm Garrett Ross. I'm a full-time fishing guide. Been doing it for right at 7 seasons now. I guess tonight I kind of want to talk to you guys about what you guys want to talk about. I don't know if there's any questions or, kind of what all we want to go over, but I'm happy to share information and kind of stuff that I've figured out over the past few years. I do have a couple rigs I brought. I want to go over the bull red fishing, which is kind of heating up this time of year. I know it's popular because I see a lot of people doing it. And one of the rigs that I brought. Familiar with these short leader rigs, the DNR's giving them out, but I make my own. I like them better, bigger hooks and even shorter leaders. And since I've been using these rigs with the weight crimped, and it's a 16-aught Mustad is what I use on here with a 100-pound test mono that I crimp. Since I've been using these for the past 5 years, I've had 0 gut hook bull redfish, not a single one in 5 years. I'm probably catching 200 to 300 bull reds, in a season. I haven't gut hooked a single one. So that's one thing, that's kind of near and dear to my heart that, I'm happy to pass this around. I harp on with a lot of different people. These fish, can be 40 to 50 years old is the end of their lifespan. And they're a resource that we got to protect. So, how many of you guys I'm going to ask for a show of hands. Who likes to catch redfish best? That seems to be most people's favorite fish to catch, but most people like to eat trout better, right? Yeah. This year has been a phenomenal redfish year. I've watched the recruits come up this summer. I think this fall is probably going to be one of our best redfish falls. Water temperature is still up, but it's going to be a phenomenal year. I guess really, anybody have any questions about stuff that they want to go over, anything they've got from me? No, I don't at all. And that's a great question. So what I found, if you fish in the surf, you can catch bull reds, but most of them are going to be your 32 to 36 inch male bull reds. They're a little spunkier. They get in shallow 2-3 feet sometimes, in the breakers. But I'm targeting the big females. That's what people want, is those big 40+ inchers. The biggest one I've caught, I could see Landings Harbor from where I caught it, and it was 56 inches. But I'm fishing, I'll go over. What I look for when I'm targeting these bull redfish are mud flats near a drop off. So a lot of people fish the sandbars and they fish the points, and they're anchored up in 10 feet of water, and they throw 1 in 2 feet, one behind the boat, and one out deeper. But if you find the big mud flats, that's where these big females go on high tide, and they're eating the mullet and the crabs and the stuff up there. Because the tide drops out, they can't sit on that mud flat. So they want to find the deepest part near that mud flat where the bait's just going to get washed in that. They're big, lazy fish that just have, they're not going to go chase it around like the smaller reds do. But that's, if you can find that kind of bottom structure, near a big mud flat where it drops off like 22 feet, seems to be kind of my magic number. Then it's just a patience game. So my theory on it is, and I make those are all rigs that I make at home. The DNR leaders are a little bit longer, and they're using smaller circle hooks. There's the same rigs that they're passing out in Florida and some other places. And I think the fish are a little skittish down there because it's clear water, so they can't use a big giant hook. But we don't have to worry about that here. But my theory on that is, by having it so short, that fish, I'm using a big chunk of mullet, or some kind of big bait, mostly mullet. When that fish eats it, it gets to that weight, feels it, realizes something's wrong, and hauls butt. And that's when I'm hooking them. It's just not long enough to get down into the throat, into the crushers. I mean, we don't miss very many fish. Most of the time, the fish are hooked in the rod holder. You're just trying to lift that rod out because he's hauling butt the other way. So that that's why I use those, and that's probably they want to get away. They realize something's wrong, and they're heading east usually. Yes, sir. Right. Oh, I mean, are you talking about like fishing up in the creeks and stuff? It is. There are a ton of fish out there. But like I found out today, there's still a lot of shorts. Our water temperature was still 81 degrees today. And we had to weed through a bunch of 13.5, 13.75 inch trout. And we found some nice fish, but it was, it was the numbers game. Catch 50 trout, catch 10 redfish for one keeper. And I think as that water drops down to the 70s, the bait's going to start moving out more. The shrimp are going to, start going in the deeper holes, and they're really going to start putting on the feed bag and getting a little bit bigger. So. That's my average. So, obviously our current flow changes a lot here. Today we had, I don't think it was supposed to be as big as it was, but it was a lot of water movement, today. We had that east wind pushing the water up the sounds, and it was hauling butt getting out of here. So I find 6 ounces covers me on most days. I've got a big box of those that I rig up, and some of them are, 8 ounce is probably about the heaviest I do. And then I've got, some 4 ouncers in there too. But I find that the bigger the weight doesn't seem to bother the fish. I don't think they care. I think once it gets to, they're not leader shy. So the purpose of the weight is to let them know something's wrong and get them to, hook themselves. So 6 seems to be kind of general purpose, works for me. Oh, yes, sir. Oh, my apologies. Yes, sir. Yes, sir. So just go through the different, he asked what our 12-month season looks like. As far as, I don't stop fishing, you know, the clientele slows down a little bit in the wintertime, but you know, I don't stop fishing. I go nonstop. But starting off in January, you know, I'm finding a lot of trout and a lot of overslot reds. Those are my two money makers in the January, February, early March timeframe. When you're fishing like trout, as most of you guys probably know, they go deep in the wintertime. You know, they get, so I've caught them with mud rings on their bellies from where they're just sitting sedentary in the bottom of these creeks. A lot of, you know, deep hole shrimping, you know, to get our bait. A lot of times the bait houses don't have them, but there are, you know, if you pay attention to your sonar, you can find bait year round. The big reds in the wintertime, they like to hang around heavy structure, you know, docks, rocks, and trees. That's, you know, that's my three favorite things to fish, you know, in the wintertime. And they like deep water nearby in the winter as well. That's one thing you won't find as much in the winter, or at least that I haven't found, is like the reds that get up in the shallows. You'll get a big school of reds in the flat in the wintertime, but most of your big fish, they want deep water nearby. They're not going to get up in the grass flats and, you know, get up real skinny. You know, they seem to hang, they're heavy structure, and I think they're more prey for the dolphins, so they like to hang around, you know, safety. Still catch some flounder, and obviously sheepshead fishing in the wintertime gets really good. You know, the colder the water temperature, the better the sheepshead fishing gets. Then as we move into spring, you know, most of you guys know the trout start to spawn. You know, it's usually mid-March we start finding them with the rose sacks, and that's one of my favorite times of year. You know, March, April, early May, that we start catching some really nice trout. I'm a big advocate of releasing, you know, the large breeder females. I know there's been some really good studies done on, you know, the difference between a 14-inch trout and a 20-inch trout and the number of roe that they lay. I really try and preach it. Unfortunately, in my job, sometimes, you know, it doesn't work. I get people and they say, well, is it illegal? No, sir. Well, put it in the box. So it does happen, you know, but a lot of people are pretty good sports about it, releasing the big girls in the spring. As we move into the warmer water, this year, I think it was May that the jack showed up, which was really early. I don't know how many of you guys have ever tried to target jacks, but that is a really fun fishery. Something that you know, I do probably more than most of the guides around here, and it's a cool thing. Going out and looking for these fish, they look like schools of bait fish up on top of the water, and we're throwing topwater plugs at them, and it is fun. If you've never hooked a jack, I highly suggest trying to go do it, because it you know, I tell people it's not the horsepower, it's the torque that gets you. You know, they just bite. Yes, ma'am. No, you don't have to go far at all. Most of you, if you own a boat, have probably driven right by them. They are out in the Sound, they're in the Savannah River, they're in front of Tybee, they're pretty much everywhere that you would go in a boat. That's where the jacks are. Most people just don't know what to look for, and it's funny. It looks very similar to a school of menhaden. You know, that ripple on the water. There's kind of a cloud. You know, you think it's bait fish, and you have to stop and look to actually see just the tips of their dorsal fins sticking out of the water. That's all it is. It's once you see it, you can't unsee it. You know, after you see your first school of jacks, everything looks like a jack. You know, I'll be driving around in January and I'm like, well, no, it's the wrong water temp. They're not here. But they're really cool. Is there a season for the tarpon? There are. This year, I had a terrible tarpon season. I think a lot of guys did. There's a few people that were consistently on the tarpon this year. I was not one of them. Most times we'd go maybe give it an hour, and I just didn't have the confidence. You know, I wasn't seeing the numbers of fish we've seen in years past. I didn't have friends telling me good reports. You know, we weren't seeing them bust bait. The menhaden were rolling through, just looking really comfortable this year. You know, it was not a good year for me. But I usually start looking for them in July, August being kind of the peak through September. You know, that's typically our best time of year for tarpon. That being said, I did jump one last week wild bull red fishing with cut mullet on the bottom. I wasn't planning on it, wasn't looking for it, but it was a fun surprise. Yes, sir. Guides. Yeah, we've got some tides, don't we? When I first started, I really liked fishing the bottom of the tide, like last 2 hours of outgoing, first 2 hours of incoming. Now that I do it for a job, I don't have the luxury of picking my time to go all the time. Now, I've developed kind of areas that I find produce better on certain tide stages. Obviously for the redfish, I like a lower tide stage. A mid tide, in or out, seems to be better, because once that water gets up in the grass, those fish, they go back to those creeks and they go way up into the grass, and they're just much harder to catch. One cool thing, this is a good little tip. I tell people this quite a bit. If you've got a spot that has fish, and I get people that say, well, I've got a good low tide spot over there, or I've got a good high tide spot over there, but I can't find them on any other tide. Stay and play with depth, adjusting your depth of your corks, distance off the bank. These fish, as the tide comes up, I find the fish get really close to the grass, and as the tide comes out, they move further off. Well, there's some spots where, if the bank is over here, I might be fishing 40 feet off the bank and catching trout, way, way off the bank. So if you've got a good fishy spot and you've only got it dialed in on one tide, just play with your depth, play with your distance off the bank, they're there, they're not leaving, they're not going anywhere else, they're still there. It's just figuring out where they're moving, where they're shifting in relation to that bank, on that tide. But today was today was a prime example of, supposed to be a 7.4 tide at Bull River, and there was way more water back in there than there was supposed to be. We were looking for tailing reds at one point, and we saw a couple, and there was so much water that they were 300 yards further back than they should have been. So tides definitely play a big factor in stuff. Yes, sir. Does the fishing shut down at slack tide? It's definitely not my favorite. For most species, there are a few spots, that I have where I really like a slack tide for redfish, because they might get pulled up in like a little deeper hole in a creek. They can't get up, in the grass, they can't get in the oysters. So, there's some slack tide spots, but in general, it is not my favorite. It is definitely difficult. I think they like the water moving. They're ambush predators for the most part. So if the bait's not getting washed to them, it can be difficult to get a bite. Yes, sir. So for bait for bull reds, mullet's my go-to. That's what I like. I know guys that fish crabs and all that. I find they don't stay on the hook very well. They get chewed apart. And I like using the heads of the mullet, because I'll cut them, a big 10, 12-inch mullet. I'll use 6 inches of it, knowing that the little fish are going to chew up the back, and I still want enough meat there so that, as those little fish are chewing it up and dispersing that scent, down the current, that there's still something for the bull red to eat. But I've used yellowtail for bull reds, when I couldn't find mullet. Cut ladyfish, if you can stomach handling ladyfish, they are a good bull red bait. I've used bluefish. I've used all sorts of different fish, but mullet is definitely my go-to. Yeah, I don't see it, I don't think there's any issue with it. The mullet for me is easy. I can store it in my freezer. I've got a lot of supply, that I can get. I think it's it's pretty oily and it disperses scent pretty well. Plus, you got to think it's the mullet run. All our mullet are running right now, so that's what these bulls are in here eating. They're coming in from offshore, so I think it's their preferred food. But using whiting, obviously you caught 2 today, it works. I don't have an issue with it at all. But the mullet is definitely my favorite. Oh, yes, ma'am. Beating a lot. What am I doing with the fly rod? I'm casting at a lot of fish. you know, if any of you guys fly fish, you know it is not the most efficient way to catch fish, but it might be the most fun. It's what I do on my days off when, you know, when we've got a big tide, and it's what I like doing. There's still some big fish. We saw some really big fish in the marsh today. We just couldn't get to them. I've got a 25-foot bay boat, so getting stuck in the marsh is not ideal situation for me. But I mean, I make it work. We get in, you know, pretty good for these fish. But as far as the fly fishing goes, you know, I know a lot of guys blind cast for trout and do pretty well with the fly rod. I'm a visual guy. If I can't see that fish, I'm not really casting at it. So I do mostly redfish up in the grass. But they should be, as long as this water temperature stays up and we get these nice sunny days, you know, we'll probably have tailing reds through the month. You know, they'll still stick around. What weight fly rod? I use an 8-weight fly rod. It's one I picked up years ago, but it's a really nice one. I use an 8-weight with a floating line, weight forward. Usually 14-pound tippet is typically kind of what I'm going with. You can go a little heavier, you know, if the water's a little bit muddied up, but if it's really clear, you know, it's a smaller flood tide, you want to go pretty light on your tippet. I also throw mostly flat crab patterns that a friend of mine, I don't know if any of you guys know Robert Shahusky. He's a used to guide fly fishing, but he's a good friend of mine. And he ties these phenomenal little crab patterns, and he uses Aunt Lydia's rug yarn. He's convinced that it's something about the yarn that makes them, you know, just the right density, and it's pretty neat. They're cool little flies. No, it's got a little barbell weight to it, and the way it is, if you think about a crab that's crawling on the grass and a redfish comes by, you know, that crab's going to drop and hit the bottom. But crabs don't move when they're threatened. They just stand there with their claws up, and they don't move. You know, they're not trying to run away from the fish. They're just trying to look intimidating and try not to get eaten. So I don't strip them at all. I don't touch them. The only time I'll ever really move it is if I think a fish doesn't see it. I mean, I'll move it just an inch or two, you know, just try and get their attention and let that fish spin around. But I think they're looking at silhouettes more than anything else. You know, if it's the shape of a crab, you know, that's what they're looking for. Funny little story. I use these little tiny corks when I'm fishing with some of my clients up in the, you know, on the flood tide for these tailing reds. And I painted the bottom of them black so that they wouldn't stand out like a big bright, you know, orange and white cork. And since I did that, I've had more redfish eat the bottom of my cork, you know, and I think they just see a dark, you know, round silhouette, and I have them eat the cork all the dang time. We think we're hooked up, and we're not, you know. Maybe I got to find a different color, you know, but yeah, put a hook on the cork, right? But yeah. A tailing red. So redfish, what I call a tailer is one that's up in the grass on a flood tide. And we don't get, you know, we're not like Charleston where they get a flood tide almost every day and the fish go up there, and you know, there's guys that make full-time living 7 days a week going into flooded grass. Our tides are so drastic here that, you know, we may only get 6 times a month that our grass floods, or we might have a month where it's flooding almost every day. And what's happening is these fish, they want to eat fiddler crabs. That's like a treat to them. They don't get to eat them all the time. And so when you've got these warm summer days and you've got, you know, these fiddler crabs are just running around, you know, in the flats, as soon as that water gets up there, these redfish are coming in and they're rooting around, digging for these fiddler crabs and just picking them up off the bottom. So they stand on their heads and their tails come out of the water, and we call it winking and waving. You know, they're just letting you know, hey, I'm right over here. And it's a really, really cool thing to do. It's about as close to bow hunting on a boat as you can get. You know, it's very challenging, but it is really cool. Yeah. Fishing along the Intracoastal. I mean, there's some really good spots along the Intracoastal. I don't fish too many of them because you can't hide. Everybody sees you. You know, if you're fishing on one spot and you're on a, you know, really great bite and 17 boats drive by, and then they look at Facebook and they're like, well, Garrett caught a bunch of fish. He must have been over there. You know, I try and avoid some of it. There's obviously some spots, you know, like the one where I catch the bull reds within side of Landings Harbor that, you know, the first 2 years I fished it, everybody thought I was catching sharks and whiting, and you know, and then the cat got out of the bag, and now you take a number to go get in line and wait there. But there are some really good spots. You know, actually, my brother and my dad went out scouting this afternoon, and they caught 9 redfish, you know, along the Intracoastal right outside of Isle of Hope. So, yeah, there's some good fishing along there. You know, you just got to be aware if you're fishing on a weekend that you got all that boat traffic and you're going to be rocking and rolling, and you know, and I don't like fishing in a crowd. I like getting off the beaten path, and if I can stay as far away from other boats as possible, that's my goal. So, yes, sir. Oh, I'm sorry. Yeah, I'm easily distracted. You know, you'll have to reel me in every once in a while. So May, you know, we talked about the spawning trout. You know, the redfish are you know, the big reds are still around in May. You know, you were catching a lot of over slot redfish, still some pretty good slots. Usually about first week of June or so is when we see most of our slot fish disappear. I'm not really sure where they go, but I can't find them. If you guys find them, let me know, please. Like, I'd be very appreciative. But you know, they just kind of disappear. You know, you stop seeing those 16, 17-inch redfish. Now all of a sudden you're getting those 10 and 12-inch crews that are going to be nice redfish at the end of the year, but you know, we get a lot of small redfish in the summer. One cool thing I've started doing a couple of years ago, I had a friend of mine give me a spot that's off the beach, just a little ways, and it was just a small boat that sunk. You know, not much. I mean, if you were driving over it, you probably would. Hi, somebody's talking. If you were driving over it, you probably wouldn't notice it, right? Like, it's not much to it. But I started just kind of stopping in there. We get these super hot days in July and August, and there's not a whole lot going on inshore besides, you know, the tarpon and the jacks. You know, you're catching a bunch of small trout, small reds. Like, just, you know, it's a tough time of year to catch fish inshore. So I started going out there and just experimenting, throwing artificials. I bring finger mullet. Well, I have found a pile of trout miles off the beach. I mean, way off the beach. There is some really good fishing in the summertime. If it's a flat enough day that you can get offshore, you know, just a couple of miles and find some live bottoms, some structure, you know, in 10, 12 feet of water, it holds a lot of trout off of our beaches. I just kind of figured that out like 3 or 4 years ago, and it has been really, really good. We've had days catching 150 trout. I mean, big ones, you know, 3 miles off the beach. So normally when I'm doing that, I'm using a little knocker rig, a small, you know, 1 ounce, 1.5 ounce egg sinker, a little 2-foot leader, put a you know, a live finger mullet on it, and I'm throwing on the outside of the structure. You know, anywhere that you would catch small sea bass in the summertime, you know, I'm not talking about like the J buoy and the L and, you know, KC and stuff, but if you've got any live bottom areas off the beach, you know, within 5-6 miles that you catch small little tiny sea bass at, it's probably got trout too. They just hang on the outside of the wrecks, you know, the reefs and the structure. And I just cast it out, let it hit the bottom, and you know, and everybody feels it hitting the bottom. They're like, "Oh, that might have been one." You'll know. Like, I mean, you know when it hits. But it's pretty cool. That's a newly discovered fishery for me. That if you get a nice enough day to get out there, it's pretty cool. Yes, sir. Oh yeah, yeah. I mean, I don't know if any of you guys have ever cobia fished, you know, at any of those wrecks, you know, the artificial reefs and stuff. But that's where those bull reds are in the summertime. You know, I'll catch occasional bull red when I'm tarpon fishing, but not with any consistency. Not something that, you know, I feel comfortable going out and taking a client to go target a bull red in the summertime inshore. You know, you're going to get sharked up and catch big giant stingrays before you catch a bull red 99% of the time. And one thing I want to go back a little bit. We do have a bull red run in the spring. They do come in. They come in from offshore and they hold in similar areas. And I won't go target them. I don't do it. I don't go after them. They're getting ready to spawn, and I leave them alone. So, you know, there are technically bull redfish here in the springtime. I just won't go fish for them. You know, I want to let them do their thing and get bigger and, you know, be healthy and come back in the fall. And that's when I switch gears for those. But I did want to mention that. So we're July, ish timeframe, midsummer, you'll see me a lot of times in the middle of summertime heading offshore a few miles. That's something that if the weather's nice enough, you get a nice little sea breeze out there. And I like going out there in the summertime when otherwise it's a bit of a struggle, fishing in the creeks and the rivers and stuff. And then, the tarpon show up, and, you guys know most of the deal with the tarpon. I think, find the bait, find the tarpon, it's a love-hate relationship with those fish for me. And you caught several tarpon this year? You catch them in the lagoons? Yeah. Yeah. No, those are great. Are you fishing the outlets, the pipes coming out, or yeah, big? So you like a big tide too, and yeah, pitching in that water. That's a pretty. I don't know how old you are, but I was probably about your age when I used to sneak out here to Skidaway Island and go catch tarpon like that. I figured out I could throw my bike in the back of my truck and park, and I could ride my bike in through the gate. And nobody would ever stop me. So especially if I got a couple fishing rods sticking off, the security guards were like, "Hey, Garrett," I had no idea I didn't live out here. So, yeah, don't get any ideas, anybody watching. No, that was fun. So fall, I feel like we're, August 75th today, right? Like it still feels pretty summerish to me. I think we're, fall, I'm switching gears, we're starting to get some eater fish in. I'm not going after the jacks, I'm not going after carpet as much. I really like the bull red fishing. So usually mid to end of September, I'll take a 4-hour trip. I'll spend 3 hours trying to catch, some slot reds and trout. And I'll always offer like, hey, you guys want to go spend an hour? I don't have the confidence that they're in to go, dedicate a 4-hour trip to it. But I always offer, hey, you guys want to go try for an hour? We've had a good day. Let's go try it. And then that first one happens, and I'm like, all right, it's bull red time. That switch over to now I've got the confidence, and lets me have the patience to sit in one spot and actually fish for them. So water temperature is a big deal this time of year, like it is in the spring. It's a transition time. These fish, there's a ton of bait out here still. There's a ton of fish, but they're not motivated to start really eating yet. That's a big thing. That water temperature starts dropping. They start realizing, hey, winter's coming. We got to fatten up. That's when they really start to turn on, put the feed bags on and start eating everything. It's still warm. They haven't started transitioning to that fall pattern yet. They're getting bigger, but getting them to eat, can be a challenge sometimes. As soon as that water temperature starts getting down into, mid 70s, low 70s, and high 60s, like that's when they are really going to start feeding well. I'm doing surface temp. My unit's pretty good. I've got a Simrad electronics that, it seems to be pretty accurate, but I'm not dropping a thermometer down at the bottom of the river. No, I'm reading surface temperature, and, but I don't know that it changes that much here because our water is so turbulent that, we've all been at the beach and felt like, whoa, that was cold water underneath, and, it's warm up top. But I think overall, it's getting mixed up pretty well. Yes, sir. Yeah, so there are, the question was, is there a technique to target bigger trout? This time of year, yes. But you've just got to be willing to accept the fact you're not going to get a lot of bites, but the ones you get are going to be bigger. I use, big finger mullet. That is there's been research that suggests that all your big trout, they eat mostly fish rather than shrimp. They've done a lot of research on this, and if you are willing to use a bigger finger mullet than you think you should use, When it gets bit, it's going to be a real one. You know, you're not going to get those 12 and 13-inch dinks, you know, that eats a 4-inch, 5-inch finger mullet. You know, not often. I mean, they might try, but you're not going to hook them very often. But if you switch baits and use big baits, you'll catch big trout. Especially if you know, if there's a perfect example today, we were fishing one little area between two docks. It's a very steep drop off. And if there's one little creek mouth, and if you put it right in the middle of this creek mouth, we caught 3 big trout back to back. If you put it 5 feet to the left where it shallowed up, it was little trout, little trout, little trout. And we probably caught 20 little trout dialing in this little area, which I knew the fish were there somewhere, but sometimes they're behind the boat, sometimes they're in front of the boat, you know, they move along that bank. And it was one 5-gallon bucket size spot that we pulled 3 keeper trout out of. And if you missed that 5-gallon bucket size spot, it was going to be a short one. How much noise from the boat affects the fishing? I am a firm believer that noise can shut down a bite. If I'm bull red fishing or I'm even tarpon, I'll keep the music down low while I'm waiting. But if you're trying to catch trout and redfish, like, I'm a firm believer that you slam that Yeti lid one time, give up on the redfish for 15, 20 minutes. So much so that I put sea deck in my boat just to soften some of the footprints, because I take little kids and little adult kids too that jump and stomp around, and they get they miss a fish and they're kicking their feet, and any kind of banging noise like that, I really do believe shuts the fishing down. Yes, sir. Live or dead finger mullet for the big trout? Live. For trout, they like to kill things. They're predators, and and it's not a rule, but it's pretty well that if you use dead bait, the trout do not bite very well. I always hear the stories of, oh, I threw a big pink dead shrimp in my live well for 2 days and caught the biggest trout I've ever. It happens, but if you want to be consistently proficient at catching them, live bait is far better than dead bait for trout. So I'll hook shrimp two different ways. If you look at the head of the shrimp, there's that black dot. That's the brain. You can see it through his head. That's his, or at least it's attached to his brain. All I know is if you hook him there, he twitches and he's not much good after that. So I hook between the eyeball and that black dot. That's 90% of the time, that's where I'm hooking them. Now, if I'm getting fish that are short striking it, just hitting the tail, and I think it might be a trout, then I'll bend the shrimp over in half and hook him through, one section back up through the top where the point of the hook is near the head. These predatory fish typically like to eat the heads to disable the prey. So I'll hook them like that to keep the bait on a little bit better. Or if I think a sheep's head is the cork's just kind of bouncing around, but not taking it under, I think it's a sheep's head, and you pull back just, a shell of a head, 10 times in a row, then I'll hook them through the tail, bend over backwards and hook them through the tail just because they stay on a little bit better. Live mullet, I go right through the bottom lip up through the top. And one technique with that is I've seen people kill the mullet because they just push that hook through and the barb will actually break the plate on top of their head. So if you kind of work it back and forth, and get that hook to kind of rotate, it'll come through a little smoother, and keep them alive a little bit better. Absolutely. Fantastic.
Do we have any questions from the people on video conference? Okay, I hope you folks have enjoyed it.
Paulette, you've been fishing with Garrett before, haven't you? Did you catch any fish? 21 trout Wow. Wow. And what do you think of his boat? Loved a big boat. Good, good, good. How do There we go. So I'm gonna wrap up tonight, get you home. And I hope you enjoyed this presentation. We have seminars 10 months a year of various topics. And these are our focus points. We work on conservation and fishery management, size limits, things such as that, on and off the island. We work with habitat and conservation and education and public outreach with a lot of the kids on and off the island. Habitat and conservation, Chuck talked about the license plates. Last year in 2020, let it flop. Okay. DNR was able to purchase 3 large boats. When I say large boats, they purchased 2 of them were in the 185-foot range. Another one was in the 85-foot range. They were decommissioned and they were dropped offshore and creating good fishing habitat. This year they're focusing on inshore. And so inside the barrier islands, they already dropped several of the boats. And we want this to enhance the fishing habitat for Garrett. And Captain Judy and the other captains here make fishing for us much better. So hopefully it goes full circle. You know, we all benefit from this. You did mention the lady back there in the orange top about fly fishing. Have you been to any of our fly fishing seminars? Not yet. Okay. So Paulette has set up in April, we're going to have a seminar like we normally do on fly fishing. And it'll be headed up by locally Doug Painter, who's an avid fly fisherman, and Chad DeBose, who is the manager for the Orvis store downtown, Rivers and Glen. Following the seminar, there will be a 1 or 2 day seminar or a clinic on island here. And we also have rods and reels that are available for you to use that we've acquired the last couple of years. They can check out like library books. So we do recognize fly fishing as a real exquisite sport. We have events coming up and we need volunteers. The kids fishing derby is coming up on Saturday, and we'll have, I'm going to guess, we're getting a pretty good response on our registration. We have a pig on December 5th. We have an oyster and pig picking event. We put it on the line last Friday, and we have 130 people signed up for it already. And we normally target 200 people there. It'll be here at the Landix Marina, and it's quite the event. And then coming up March 1st, we have our annual banquet, well, which we normally net about $50,000. Very nice prizes were raffled off there. A number of the captains have donated charters. We have a couple nights stay down at the powerhouse that Richard Kessler has donated. And with this year, we have a Browning over and under shotgun that will be raffling off as well in the live auction. So we have a lot of neat things coming up. If it's in red up there, we could use some volunteers. So if you enjoyed tonight's seminar, you enjoyed we hope you'll consider joining CCA and possibly volunteering. This is International Bat Week. So coming up on October 30th, we have Castaway Club. It's our last kids event of the year. And we'll be having a presentation on bats in the bat house. And then we take the kids fishing for an hour afterwards at the kids fishing lagoon down there. And it's heavily stocked. Which you can read. Next month, we have Georgia Conservancy will be presenting. And I look forward to that presentation. And right now we have we're going to have a drawing. And Jeff, who's going to draw? Got any suggestions? Okay, we're going to have 2 winners. And I have tickets. Go ahead. Garrett, you're going to draw for us? Great.
All right, got 6 good ones, right?
Yeah.
Pick 2 tickets.
If the people online, we do have your tickets, and if your numbers, last month, one of the people online did win. Garrett, you want to read it?
Sure. Yes, sir. All right, the first number is 569052. Five six 569052.
We're checking on the name of the winner right now.
All right, second number.
Yep, King. Yeah, I can't read.
Oh. All right. Here's the second number. 569141.
Oh, man. On that one? Holy cow. Congratulations to Chuck Smith.
Sure. Nope. No, I'm kidding. It is.
Good. Congratulations, Chuck. And we need to get your W-9. Great. Okay, so once again, we appreciate your participation. And I look forward to seeing you on November. I think it's November 8th. We're going to have our next meeting. If you have any